Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good evening slash morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Tell me if you're an international friend and it's like weirdly not evening for you, but it's evening for both of us here. I see people coming in already. If you're not familiar, my name is Janae. I'm the Director of Leadership and Education at the Harry Potter Alliance. My pronouns are she, her. And I am very excited to have Becca here with us. Becca, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
Sure. So my name is Becca Bernstein, and I'm here with the dinner party. I use the pronouns they, them, and I am here from very cold and wintry Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah, I'm in Tucson, so we don't get at all the kinds of winters that you get. But I have to say, it has been very rainy and lovely and chill for us today. So been enjoying having some moment of winter vibe. It feels like a good moment for this live stream as well. So we're really excited to have you here. If this is your first session of these, this is a series of what we're calling the healing retreats or return to joy. We wanted to do these because we spent the last year, like most people did, working really hard on getting out the vote and getting people involved in the election. And then also, working very hard at living through a global pandemic. And we knew that we wanted to end the campaign year with this sense of like, how do we process everything that's gone on? And we had no idea how much we would need these processing moments when we planned this, but it became even more important as things went on. And so we've taken some time to think about, how do we kind of recenter ourselves. On Monday, we were talking to Casper about ritual and finding ways to kind of bring joy and ritual into our lives. But we know that everyone has experienced a lot of grief this year too. And we feel like this idea of joy and grief kind of in concert with each other is certainly a big theme in Harry Potter. And I think a lot of kind of adventure stories. So we're really excited to kind of talk with Becca and the dinner party about what that means. Could you all share with folks who maybe don't know a little bit more about what the dinner party is and kind of what you all do?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I think
Yeah.
when you get on the phone, especially right now when you haven't met people and don't know what it's going to be like. And my conversation with Janae was just so lovely, and I love all the work that you're doing. Just as a queer person, as a grief professional, as a mega Harry Potter fan, this feels all very kismet. So thanks for having me. Um, so the dinner party is a community of people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s who have lost parents, siblings, partners, children, close friends, basically anyone who has touched your life. And I first got involved in 2017 after my mom died of early onset dementia and ALS. And so I had spent a lot of my 20s unexpectedly caregiving for her. And it's something we hear from a lot of people in our community of like, my 20s are not what I thought they were going to be. My 30s are not what I thought they were going to be because this thing happened. And so really our goal is to connect people together, to help people um, and um, and to make sure that people don't have to go through the experience alone. I think we
Mm,
talk a lot about we're not trying to solve grief because grief, it just exists, right?
right.
Like it shape shifts, but it's there. Um,
Mm,
but what we are trying to solve for is isolation. And for people who feel like they're the only one or the only person they know who's gone through this, that they're able to find other people to connect to.
mhm.
So that's what the dinner party is. And the only other thing that I'll say is I think we recognize that there's lots of different forms of loss in the world, and I think the pandemic has really heightened that. And so we're also doing a lot of thinking about, we know a lot about bringing people together, and we know a lot about
Mm-hmm.
people together around hard things. So how do we sort of bring that into other areas as well? But yeah, a lot of our work has been with leading people.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say that I also had that experience on the phone call. It was very much a conversation. We're like, oh yeah, we get this. We get this. I think our organizations have very similar vibes. So I feel I've been really excited for this kind of conversation. So Becca and I have a few kind of questions we're going to kind of talk about, but also consider these posed to you all watching as well. So if you feel like sharing or just thinking about it personally, you can write things down or doodle or just kind of think about the question as we're talking about them. That'd be super awesome. And if you feel comfortable sharing, we always love things in the chat as well. And we're just gonna kind of chat through, what grief means, what it means in the context of fan activism, what it means for joy, and hopefully you all come away with some ways to kind of continue this recentering and this processing process that we have started over the last couple weeks.
Yeah. And I'll echo what Janae said, like, if you have a journal, actually, let's give everyone just like 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30-second journal break, journal run.
No, but if you want to like grab something to write with, or draw on, definitely want this to be like a reflective space for you. And then again, as Janae said, you're also welcome to put things in the comments if you want other people to see them. But we also recognize that there might be things that you're thinking about that are just for you, and that's also totally fine.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me, I want to put this up because if there's anything that you all are kind of journaling about or you want to talk more about, but maybe you don't want to put it in a YouTube comment, this is the HPA's Discord server, and there are lots of like-minded folks in there who are very open to feeling sharing. So that's another kind of option for you if you want to talk things out, but you're like, live comments, maybe not.
Yeah. So I think the first question that we wanted to just open up for people is, we recognize that this is just it's like a loss-filled time. And both on an individual level and I think like a collective level too. And so we're curious, just what are you grieving right now? And it can be anything, it can be seeing people or seeing your friends or something related to the pandemic. It can be something that's more specific to death loss. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. But curious what, if you came here tonight, obviously the words joy and grief brought you in. And so would love to know what you're grieving.
Yeah. I knew this question was coming because we wrote them together, but I was trying to think about, what, because I know for me, I definitely get in a pattern of there's so much. There are so many answers to this. I feel like a lot of us could have a list from this past year alone. And there's also, an underlying sense of I feel very lucky. I haven't lost somebody close to me in this pandemic. While so many others have. I think one thing that's been coming up for me a lot lately, and it kind of changes by the week. I don't know about you, but kind of every week there's something.
Every day.
There's something new. Yeah, every day. Lately I've been grieving interactions with strangers. And I don't just mean the opportunity to see strangers, because that's kind of its own thing. But I also I used to be the sort of person who, would have a casual conversation in the grocery store or would pick something up for somebody when they needed it. And that, like, I got more out of that than I realized now, when those interactions feel so much more fraught. I have, personally developed this fear around other people that I really hate. There was this elderly woman dropped something in the grocery store a few weeks ago, and I automatically went to pick it up, and then I was like, oh, I don't actually know if it's good for me to pick this up. What if I transfer something, I touch something to her? And that, I was just like, gosh, what a shift, what a added layer of complication and this sense of like separation that is really sad. And hopefully, we heal from that, but that's been coming up for me a lot lately.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Janae. And I see Abby's comment about grieving what she thought her grad school experience would be, and just want to name, I think that's so normal, and I've heard that from so many different people this year. It's just like this thing that I thought was going to be part of my year, whether it's like my work life, or I was going to see family, or I was going to go on a trip, or I was going to get married, or I was going to, like, any of these things. Like, I think so many, that's so real. It's just like not having that luck how you thought it might. So
Yeah. We were in the session on Monday. For anyone who was there, this was a funny moment, but also a sad moment of, we were talking about conventions and how much conventions are kind of a center point in fandom life for a lot of people, and a really big, like, kind of community moment and tradition. And, just kind of hearing from a lot of people that can feel like a silly thing to grieve. They tell themselves the story about how, like, no, like, that's not important in the scheme of things. But we were just kind of talking through, like, but it is important. It's this ritual that really matters to community building. And I know a lot of people, just in that industry or section of life, there were so many that got canceled this year.
yeah, and it's interesting, like, for an organization, like, the dinner party is focused on death loss, but we talk all the time about grief wars and how unproductive they are. I think, similarly to, like, Oppression Olympics, of like, my life is harder than yours, my grief is harder than yours, versus, like, building out the skill set to be able to just, like, acknowledge whatever it is you're going through and what other people are going through, and resisting the urge to compare. And obviously we all compare our experiences to each other. Yeah. Like, that's part of, like, being human.
Yeah.
But I also think in this moment, there is just so much to grieve. And some of it is the small things. Like, I walk by my coffee shop outside.
Yeah.
And like, I haven't been in there in months,
Yeah.
It's unprecedented. And so I think I don't think that there's, like, too small of a thing now. And I think for me, I would say my answer to the question is really just, I mean, I feel like I'm grieving a lot of things, but I feel like the big ones is just, like, my friends, my family, like, touch with people outside of my, like, 1 to 2 person pod, like, I don't know. I miss I in some ways I think I'm grieving myself. Like, I don't know other people, but I dealt with a lot of depression this year, and more than usual. And and I haven't been the best version of myself, you know?
Yeah.
In some ways I'm grateful for like the acceptance piece of that, of like, figuring out every day, okay, well, like, how can I try and stay sturdy with
Mhm.
myself? But I feel like the truth is I've been really depressed and kind of a mess for most of this year, you know?
Yeah.
I miss the person that wasn't. And for me, again, there's just such uh, there's freedom for in saying that out loud, and in just being,
Mhm.
yeah, uh, that is that's what 2020, you know, that's what it's been. So yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much. My friends and I have had a lot of conversations about like that sort of sensation, the sensation of like missing our friendship when we weren't both depressed and in it with the election and the pandemic and everything. Be like, man, remember how we used to be? Just it's hard. It's a very real and a very hard thing.
Totally.
I also see another shout out for coffee shops, man. Becca, I don't know if you were a remote worker before this, but I was, and ooh, those coffee shops, I miss them so badly. Truly my second office, second home.
Exactly. I was too.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're talking about, okay, there's a list a mile long of things that we're all grieving right now. And you all talk a lot about processing that and not keeping it silent, not keeping it hidden. Um, do you have some ways that from a dinner party or perspective you all have learned or have shared of how to process when you have a list this long of every kind of grief you can imagine, and how to put that into some space that you can kind of move through it or at least sit with it in a way that feels good, you know? Or I shouldn't say feels good, feels productive perhaps.
Yeah. No. Um, it's a great question. I think the like it's kind of a little bit of an eye roll answer. When you're grieving, you're like, can you just tell me something a little bit more helpful than this, please? Like, give me the guidebook. Like, tell me what to do.
Mhm.
And really, I feel like so much of it for us is just like it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's okay. And we get so many messages in the world about just like we should be okay all the time and social media and all these things. And it's like, no, actually, the I think the biggest way to process grief is just to acknowledge when things aren't okay. Obviously, with the dinner party, we believe that that's not something that anyone should have to do alone. So, first step, being able to acknowledge that things aren't okay. Second step, being able to find people who you can acknowledge things aren't okay with. I think,
Yeah.
you know, Rachel, who commented in our little thing, is I'll give her a shout out, is what she works for the dinner party as well, and connects people to a grief buddy, so someone who they can talk to,
Mhm.
one-on-one connection kind of way. We also do a lot of small groups, but all of it is in service of please, 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 whether you're listening, whether you're participating, like, do not try to grieve in a vacuum by yourself. Like,
Mhm.
is, you know, um, and and then I also think, you know, like there are some things that then you also do have to do by yourself. Like again, there isn't a wrong way to
Yeah.
grieve. Like journaling, as we encourage people to do during this, or you know, looking at photos, going outside. In terms of, you know, part of the reason that we're called the dinner party is because food is such an important piece of memory, and
Mhm.
we often hear from people the meaning of making a recipe of that meant something to the person that they lost or meant something in the relationship.
Mhm.
You know, there's a million different ways I think to grieve. Um, but I think just really being able to acknowledge it and stay with it, um,
Yeah.
and 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 yeah, and find other people who get it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nina put that great quote. The pain demands to be felt, and it's very true.
It is.
I really like what you're saying about just acknowledging that you're not okay, and it's okay that you're not okay to other people. I definitely like in the process of my friends and I being like, God, remember when? There's also so much power in just being like, yeah, we're all a little messed up right now. Like, it's okay. Nobody is at their best. Everyone is in it with a capital I and a capital I, and it just is what it is. And in some ways, I have certainly had moments of the sometimes the collective grief, at least, is something to lean on in a weird way for me. You know, the even in the moments of, you know, the funny election memes and the, the responses to things like that kind of communal conversation I have often found helpful. And I think it is that of everyone just being like, it is what it is right now, you know, and there's no one person or one way to go about it.
Yeah,
Very real thing.
absolutely.
And if anything's been working for you all, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. Making your own coffee shop at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Figuring out those fancy coffees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that Janae and I were kind of talking about briefly in our conversation before we hopped on here, specifically for the Harry Potter fans out there, is the concept of thestrals. And we're just talking about like like when you've experienced loss, and when you obviously in the case of thestrals have seen someone die, that there is something to this idea of there's like power or strength, or like I think about it as superpowers that also that experience. And I think, Janae, what you were saying earlier about like the connection between grief and joy, like they are so connected. I think we culturally sometimes want them to be different. It's just like, okay, put the joy over here, the grief over here, they're separate.
Yeah.
Right in the middle. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot in the dinner party is just that, like, you do see the world differently after you have loss. And in some ways, that's can be a really incredible gift, even if it effing sucks. And I just want to name that first, it effing sucks, and then maybe feel like a gift. Like I don't want a silver lining it, or or make it seem anything that it's not. But yeah, so yeah, I think one of the questions we were interested in exploring is like, what does it mean to see thestrals if you're someone who does, and how if you have experienced loss in any form, how has it changed you, or been a gift or something that inspires joy?
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I have definitely seen a whole lot of post-pandemic bucket list making from from friends, which, you know, is a little there's mixed feelings about it, right? But I think there is something really interesting to me I'm fascinated by what communities will look like after the world has kind of collectively gone through this experience of life so suddenly changing, and things that we kind of took for granted so suddenly being taken away, experienced by just about everyone, right? Like that's such a strange thing. to have so many people having this shared experience, and like, what the heck is society going to be like when everyone comes out of this? And I think a lot of people are going to come out of it with, you know, maybe a sense of jumping into some things they might not have before. I think that's going to be really, like you said, we all need to acknowledge that it effing sucks, but also I think it's going to be really interesting in a lot of ways to see kind of how it shifts the way that people respond to things.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like losing someone at such a young age, and just like did not at all expect that that's how my life was going to look. I think I realized really quickly um, that there is a desire. Well, can't things just go back to the way they were?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's the necessity of creating a new normal, right? Which is, I think, like, I don't know, I hear people wrestling with this right now. They're like, oh, well, when there's a vaccine, like things
Mm-hmm.
are gonna go back. Like, then I'll
Yeah.
just do everything that I once did. Um, and I think, like, as a griever, I think I've like definitely thought about like, well, one of the things I know how to do is create a new normal and
Mm-hmm.
accept that there's a new normal. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think people talked about this a lot at the beginning of the pandemic. I haven't heard as much about it recently, but maybe I just haven't been in the right spaces. About like there are things we also don't want to go back to, right?
Right.
There are things,
Right.
there are things, you know, like I think people really understanding what it means to be an essential worker and inequity in our society and just like, yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious in the comments if other people have been part of those conversations as recently as at the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of the pandemic. Because at the beginning of the pandemic, I feel like people were like, oh, we need to change things. Like
Yeah.
capitalism isn't working, you know, like
Right.
radical than ever.
Right.
And so yeah, so I guess I still do hold hope for a new normal. And I think people who have had to create a new normal for themselves, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I think a lot of us have probably had to in various ways. You've lost a job, you've had a divorce, you've lost someone important in your life, whatever, lost yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you create a new normal. And so I think, I don't know, it's a new kind of front lines maybe of um
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely seen a lot of the conversations around how quickly people learned that actually they didn't like capitalism. At the beginning of the pandemic was a thing. I One thing that has stood out to me a lot is you know, people with disabilities have experienced a lot of barriers because of the pandemic, but also I've seen a lot of conversation around how many accommodations workplaces have suddenly been able to make that they weren't able to make before, and how radically this has changed our perspective on what is possible for workplaces and for schooling, which I think is really interesting, and is going to make a lot of arguments much harder after this. So there's stuff like that for sure, where kind of the scripts we were using for what was possible and what was doable and what was acceptable have definitely changed in places like that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think like I love that you put accommodations in quotes, and I think
Mhm.
I would do the same thing with inclusion. Like I think
Mhm.
for that's like such a it's a real word. I also think it's kind of a jargon word of like,
Yeah.
like it's not about adding people on. I think we think of inclusion sometimes as like, okay, well, let's create the thing and then let's add people on top of it.
Right. Mhm.
The thing is created for like white, straight,
Yeah.
wealthy people, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, yeah, again, who knows? But I hope that the normal that we create is thinking less about inclusion and more like how do you make things like good and equitable and safe from the very beginning? Like how is
Yeah.
that the first thing you do? How is that the foundation that you build other things on?
Yeah.
And I yeah, um, yeah, we'll see. That feels energizing.
Yeah.
The world I want to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean,
But that's the world I want to be a part of. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I like Rachel's comment here about in a Harry Potter lens, which we're about here. The way that Luna specifically cares for and about the Thestrals really struck Rachel. That there's been a loss and there's grief, but that there's a new thing you've gained from it and they're useful. I really like the focus Rachel put on that, on that sense of the caring for the Thestrals, this kind of embodiment of loss. Because I think that's it's an interesting thing to highlight. It's an interesting concept in the story to begin with. And later on, the fact that Harry knows that Thestrals exist directly allows their group to move forward in the quest and the adventure and to get some things done. Now, they also make mistakes with the things they were doing with the Thestrals, but we won't get into that. We're just going to say that the Thestrals let them do some things later on. But I think like that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Like this, sometimes knowing a thing helps you kind of get into next steps that maybe you couldn't have accessed before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that Rachel is naming and that I think you were naming is like the new found ability to maybe care or show up for other people,
Mm-hmm.
other creatures, what have you.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Nina saying that the things that you lose have a way of coming back to you. Such a good Luna quote. Yeah. So like, I don't know, Becca, if you were following our Granger 2020 campaign at all. Hermione Granger was running for president. Maybe again in her future sometime, but for now, she's very happy to keep working in the community. But one of the things that Team Granger was doing a lot of was this idea of kind of imagining the world that we're fighting for, like this concept of not worrying so much about the logistics of it all and just imagining like, what do we actually want? Like what what is it that we're striving for and we're working towards? And as we were talking about kind of some of the ways that you brought up the changes in conversations that this experience has brought, and this idea that we don't want to go back to the normal that we had before. And I think like there is an element of kind of forced imagination, right? Like there's been there's been a lot of creativity, a lot of like being forced out of the routines we are used to and kind of made to have to work through a new system or figure out a new solution. And so that's kind of, not a situation I would have asked for that to be a thing. But now that it is a thing, there has been for me a lot of inspiration in seeing the solutions we've come up with and the solutions people have found for art and creativity and meeting and finding ways to kind of bring folks together still has been kind of inspiring to see.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, essentially everything you're saying is like the ability to adapt and
Yeah.
which we have. And I also hope we have to adapt less in the future.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, I'm gonna spring a question on you.
Okay.
I apologize. I did not put this. I did not prepare Becca for this question, but I'm gonna spring it on them anyway. We've been asking everyone, what does joy actually mean to you, and kind of defining this word that we keep throwing around. And I would be remiss to not have your opinion in our series. So I'd love to know kind of what that word actually means.
Oh, I love this question. And it is being sprung upon me, but I love it. For me, the first thing that came to mind was like play and lightness, and I don't know, I feel like I can feel joy a lot in my body. Just like I'm not heavy, I'm not weighed down. I'm like, when I'm in my bed, my friends and I often joke that I'm not really a human, I'm a creature. Maybe I'm a thestral, who knows? And I think that but I think that that's really like, when I'm at my best, I think I'm, I don't know. I just like, when you ask me, I don't even want to verbalize it. I want to just, I want to like,
I like that. That looks like joy. I can like feel it happening.
Let's change this in a dance, really. Like, I think that's how I experience joy. And then I think like the intellectual academic answer to that question is a quote that's like, I forgot who said it. It might be Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, who I have no idea what it's about. Sorry, but I think she is the one who said that, or at least re-emphasized in her book Option B, that joy is a discipline. And so I think like, yes, joy is like freedom and freeness and movement and play. And then to me, joy is also a practice. And the quote, Nina, like the things that you lose have a way of coming back to you. I think like I find myself having to bring joy back, just like bring it back. How do I bring it back? And some days it's not possible, and you tried and it's just not there, and that's okay. And then I think other times, just being in touch with the things that you love, that make you who you are, the people that make you who you are, and just creating space for that, whatever it is. That's what
I love it.
Yeah.
I really like the combo dance answer and academic answer. that feels very HPA style, to be like, well, there's an academia response and there's a this is my dance response.
And we have both. Yeah.
Yeah, this is exactly how we do things around here. Cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. I have really loved this conversation. I really love just like bringing these two things together. And if you all are watching this later, or you're in the comments now and you saw things to talk about, do feel free to go to the Discord. Feel free to email us. If you're watching this and you haven't signed up, you can still sign up and get a free toolkit, a quick little toolkit with some different practices and rituals to help you kind of find ways back to your center, and some resource lists for you all to use to continue on that journey. Becca, we're all about self-promotion here. Is there anywhere you'd like folks to find you or find the dinner party?
Yes. So there's 3 things that I want to. So one is you can go to our website, which is just www.thedinnerparty.org. I think I have that right. If you Google the dinner party, the first thing that comes up might be this art exhibition in Brooklyn. And then that comes up is a grief organization. And we're the second one.
Great.
So, and there you can find all the information about like our virtual offerings. If you want to be part of a group, if you want to have a grief buddy, you can read and learn to your heart's content. We also, in the spirit of ritual, and I love Casper's work, so I'm so glad that you spoke to him earlier this week. But we actually are releasing a ritual collection that's specifically collective rituals for people who have experienced loss.
Oh, cool.
And it's designed for the time of COVID. So to be able to be done virtually on your own with other people. So that will be, if you want to follow us on Facebook, the dinner party on Facebook, you can find us there. If you subscribe to our newsletter, we'll be pushing that out in a number of different ways.
Super cool.
So that's something to keep an eye out for. And then this is a real long shot, but I would be remiss to say we are in the middle of a fundraising campaign. And I don't know how to put, this is something I would want to actually put a link in for. Is there a place
If you drop it in the private chat, I can copy paste it for you.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I don't think I have access to make a comment.
Yeah, let me drop it here.
Exactly. So yeah, this is our current end of year fundraising campaign where you can, it has a lot of really good information about the breadth of our work, a lot of which I didn't even describe here. And so it's a great place to both learn more about what we're doing. And then if you're interested in supporting it, $5, $10, whatever,
yeah,
really check it out. We would really appreciate it. So
yeah, totally. HPA folks know all about the power of small dollars. So take a look at that. Link is in the chat.
cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Becca. I have super loved chatting with you. Just as good as the phone call. It was lovely. And hopefully we get to have you all back again sometime in the future. Thank you all for hanging out with us in the evening and talking about grief for for a little while. We really appreciate you all and appreciate the journey you all have been on with us for this year and sticking with us because we did some awesome things together in a year that's been very hard for everyone. So deep appreciation and love for all of you. Everyone have a good night. Thank you all.
Have a great night. Bye, everybody.
Bye.